EP Magazine's annual Summer Fun issue has articles that focuses on fun activities, as well as helping reduce or avoid academic or behavioral regression over the summer. The disruption of familiar routines, environments, and limited access to school-based and other support services can be difficult for some children, especially those with special needs. Read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of REITs Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reatsacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reatsacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention.
Suicide is complex. There is no single cause.
And it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military.
Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not.
If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available.
There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis.
Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay.
Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. I'm Marine Corps veteran and your host. My name is Travis. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hoobazoo Network. You can find out more on hoobazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asek of Asek Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Case on Shaving Company and Exceptional Parent Magazine. Got a special one for you today, folks. We're going to talk about the aspect of preparation, and it's not the Boy Scouts and be prepared, but preparation is a very important aspect in the military, in life, in your career, in just having a family. And there is, in my mind, no better person to talk about preparation and what he's doing in this space than U.S. Air Force Colonel who's retired, Brian Searcy. Brian, well, actually, sir, sorry about that. Welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Travis. This is amazing.
Absolutely. So I got connected through you, through Danielle Rocco, a good friend of mine, and she told me all about you and the Paratus Group and what you do. And I thought that was, my first thought was like, it's kind of interesting, an Air Force colonel using part of the Coast Guard motto to talk about his civilian life. We'll get into all that because it's all good stuff. But you know, I'm always interested in Air Force people because my grandfather worked for the Air Force, and then I joined the Marine Corps from an Air Force town in Shreveport, Bossier. So what did you do in the Air Force? And then we'll get into more of the good stuff, sir.
Yeah, I graduated from college in 1984 and went out of the business world like a lot of people do, and realized that I really wanted to serve my country. So after about 3 years, I went to a recruiter, took all the tests, and was selected to go to officer training school in San Antonio. And from there, I was selected to go to navigator school at Mather Air Force Base. First assignment was AWACS, so I was a navigator on AWACS. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Traveled the world, became an instructor, and then that led to numerous next steps, which was to J-Stars. Then I had a tour at the Pentagon, school twice, back to the Pentagon, and I was a squadron commander, a group commander, and then the active duty wing commander for J-Stars when I retired in 2010. So if you take that time plus the last 14 years, I've got about 36 or 37 years of leadership training, experience that I brought and put into what we're doing with our program at Paratus.
Now for people who, I know what an AWACS is,
Yep.
but I don't know what a J-Star is. So tell the folks out there what those mean, please, sir.
Yeah, so an AWACS, Airborne Warning and Control, it's a 707 airplane, and people have probably seen it. It's got the big dome on top of it. So J-Stars is another 707. It's basically the same airframe as AWACS, but it has a 24-foot radar underneath the airplane that starts aft of the front nose gear and then goes for 24 feet. And it scans right and left of the bottom side of the aircraft. And it is basically monitoring and looking for ground targets. So J-Stars is an airborne control of other aircraft. J-Stars controls and works with the Army, the Marines, all the ground forces, and then coordinates with AWACS to be able to bring in air power when necessary, but also as an intelligent gathering tool, like I said, for the ground forces.
That's awesome. We used to practice, I was a hawker in the Marine Corps, so air defense, and we get to every now and then lock up on a simulated or real big target, and it was always juicy. But then the joke was, well, not for nothing, they already knew you were there before you got a lock on them. So that was always the funny joke, sir. But there is this aspect in your career where, and people don't think of this when they think of the Air Force, where there's a huge amount of preparation needed just to get an aircraft in the air, one, to go to the operating, area of operation, conduct the mission, come back. How is that drilled into the Air Force mindset from day one? Because all jokes aside, I understand, living in Shreveport Bossier and going to Barksdale, what it took to get the aircraft in the air, and talk to several airmen in my time. But for people out there, they don't really understand what goes on behind the scenes, do they?
Well, and that's the same, pretty much for any MOS, any job that we have in the military. That's why we have so much training. That's why we continually train. And I also equate it to athletes. Athletes have to establish those habits and behaviors, those muscle memory. I jokingly talk to people, if I gave you a 1-hour class and let you watch a video on how to fly an airplane, do you think you would have the skills to be able to go and fly that airplane? Well, I went to nav school for almost a year, and then I had a whole nother 3 months just to learn how to fly AWACS. And then I had continuation training all the time. And in that training, we were constantly thinking about and were presented with situations. What would you do in this, to respond to this? So one of the key things we talk about in our program all the time is you never rise to an occasion. You only fall to the level of your preparation. So that's why it's so important to have all of those experiences, and then to practice those and think about them on a regular basis, because you want that in your lizard brain, the part of your brain that you go to under stress to respond to stressful or situations that normally could force somebody to panic. But because you've thought about it, you've got it in your lizard brain, you have prepared yourself for these types of events. Now you're able to actually, in a much more calmly manner, take action and do something. And in our program, the focus is prevention. Even flying an airplane, it's all about prevention. It's making sure that you do everything that you can to hopefully not put yourself in a situation where you are going to be a target, or a threat is going to have an easy shot at you. And it's the same thing in our daily lives. Parents have the ability, when they learn and develop these critical skills, to pay attention to what's going on with their kids and recognize behaviors early, but more importantly, because what we talk about in our program is not just identifying those things, but it's actually having the ability to take action because you've thought of those actions. So I've taken all of that background of my time in the military, both flying airplanes and then I mentioned I was a squadron commander when I was at Barksdale, and our job was to run the air operations floor in a combined air operations center. So we did that twice on 2 deployments to Qatar, where we were supporting the air war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's where I really learned about preparation. I learned about the OODA loop. You can ask me about that here in a second. I learned about Colonel Cooper's colors on situation awareness. So these are all things that I learned in the military. And what we've done at Paratus is taken that and put it into a civilian program.
So before we get to Paratus, you served in the Air Force. You served for a very long time at a very high level. What was your transition out of the military like? Because the reason I ask is I've asked some officers like yourself, lieutenant colonels, and even a general, what it was like. And us enlisted, sir, have this idea that when you all get out, there's a stretch limousine that rolls up to the base, brings you home, and there's a red carpet and trumpets and all that good stuff. And you guys just breeze through life and it's all good. And I've heard varying degrees of different experiences. So I'm curious what your experience was like, going from that type of operational mindset and tempo to civilian life.
Yeah, and I think it varies a lot. People have different experiences. I narrowed some of my opportunities when I retired because I knew I wanted to be in Texas and to work for a lot of the defense contractors. That's not where they're located. They're located in Florida. They're located on the East Coast, the West Coast. Northrop Grumman, which was a company that built and developed JSTARS. I had been with that company or interacting with that company for a very, very long time. And I might have had an opportunity to take a senior role in that company, but again, there weren't any opportunities here in North Texas. So I came to North Texas. I worked for a defense contractor, like a lot of the senior guys do, as you said, for about 18 months. But I realized that that wasn't for me. Trying to sell the Air Force a product, to try and convince the Air Force of a product, especially if I didn't 100%, agree with its necessity for the Air Force. And the other thing, though, at the end of that 18 months that my wife actually, hit the nail right on the head, I needed to have a mission. And that's one of those reasons why when I graduated from college and went to work for Johnson Wax, selling their products, and that didn't last very long because it didn't provide me that mission. That's why I ended up going into the Air Force. So when I retired, and like I said, after about 18 months, she was the one that said, "Hey, you don't look happy. You're not acting happy. And it's because you don't have a mission." And so that is what I focused on since about 2013, 2014. My mission when I left working for the defense contractor was to help her build her commercial screen printing company. So I brought some of my leadership experience and those things in, put some processes in place. Then I did some leadership consulting and a number of other things. But after an active shooting event in a school a number of years ago, I realized that this was going to be my new mission. I didn't know it 100% when that happened, but God puts everybody where they need to be. And I was invited to go up to Connecticut with approximately 14 other former military, law enforcement, super dudes. And I left that place after a week realizing that this was my new mission. And it wasn't about how to, necessarily train schools to be safe and what they should do in those types of situations. It was all about the left of bang. How do you do the prevention? And most times when I give a presentation, I talk about how, anytime I bring up a concept or anything, you can be guaranteed I've stolen it at least twice. There's really nothing new out there. It's how you put it together. And then what's unique about our program is putting a program together that takes an investment where you develop the habits, the behaviors, and the mindset. And it takes time to be able to do that. But left of bang was a big focus for me. And one of the reasons I mentioned, the stealing piece, there's a great book called Left of Bang, which I'm sure you're familiar with, written by two Marine Corps officers. They were actually directed to put together the Combat Hunter program for Marines because Marines were dying in Afghanistan and Iraq because, even in the Air Force, you're trained with that contact with the enemy. You're not trained to go out and patrol and do all those types of things on a regular basis. So, Marines were being ambushed. There were IEDs and things that were going on. So Left of Bang was all about empowering the Marines to recognize what normal looks like. Then when something is introduced into the area, you got a freshly dug hole, or, the list can go on. Now you get that hair on the back of the neck, you get that gut feeling, and you're empowered to do something to protect yourself and to protect your Marines. And that's why I said I took that, the OODA loop, Colonel Cooper's colors, and put that into a civilian program.
Before we talk about the program, let's talk about preparation. Paratus. Semper Paratus is the Coast Guard motto, but Paratus in and of itself means preparation. The challenge has to be for anybody, and you're addressing this challenge, is it's not tangible. I can't touch preparation. Like I have my, first aid kit here at home. I have my flashlight, I have those things, but I don't have a container that's marked preparation, but it has to be prevalent in my mind for when bad things happen. Kind of take me through in your mind or what Paratus says preparation is, sir.
Yeah. So what you just talked about it's a concept. And okay. I talk about preparation the same way that I talk about leadership. There's a lot of people out there that talk about leadership that, have written books on leadership. And most of that is traditional training. It provides great information. And just like, suicide prevention, bullying prevention, drug prevention, there's a lot of great information there that is part of being prepared to be able to prevent bad things from happening. The problem is people don't establish the habits and the behaviors, and they don't think about actions that they should take. In leadership, if all you do is go to a bunch of seminars, if you read a couple books, but you don't turn that into the verb, you don't turn it into action, if you don't turn that into looking for learning opportunities, then you're actually not learning. You are learned potentially about what leadership is, but you are not practicing leadership. The same thing applies to being prepared. You can have food sources, water sources, you can have things that you carry on a regular basis. I talk all the time about your everyday carry, which most people, if they are a weapons person and they carry a gun, they know what EDC is. But what almost everybody in our country doesn't understand is everybody has an EDC. You carry your keys, you carry a pen, you carry your phone, you carry your wallet. That's your everyday carry. And then if you add things to it that are part of your self-defense or protection or defense of others, well, that's then part of your everyday carry. But those are the tools. The true preparation, your true everyday carry, is that situational awareness, is practicing the ability to be able to identify so that you can prevent bad things from happening. That's always the number one goal. That's left of bang. Then how do after I'm prepared, if I can't prevent something from happening, have I thought through the actions to take to protect myself or to help somebody else? I have jumper cables in my car, in my truck, and on a regular basis, well, not on a regular basis, but probably 5 or 6 times a year, I have the opportunity, because I'm prepared with the tools, but also because I see the opportunities. I have empathy and humility, which are 2 of the 10 critical skills we have in our program. I'll take time out of my day in the parking lot and jump somebody's vehicle. It's the same thing if you carry a tourniquet. I carry a tourniquet and have an IFAC on me all the time. But I have to not only have the tool, I have to be trained on how to use the tool. And Travis, here's the other thing. And I learned this when I was doing some training in some schools, that the teachers are required to have stop the bleed training at the beginning of every school year. Well, it's about an hour and a half training. They don't even practice with the tourniquet. They show them what the tourniquet is. I came in and did some training about 7 months later, and I asked them if they had stop the bleed training. They said yes. So I pulled out my tourniquet and I threw it to a teacher, and that teacher had no idea how to use that tourniquet. So that traditional training of stop the bleed, where there was nothing that reinforced how you use that tourniquet, that was a perishable skill. So they totally forgot how to use that tourniquet. So if something bad were to happen, they would not have been able to effectively use that tourniquet, whether on themselves or on somebody else. And the other critical thing here is that because they're not reminded of that training and they're not reminded of those tools that are available and where those tools are, most of the time they couldn't even tell me where the tactical medical kit with the tourniquet was located in the school. So that's why it's so important to have the process that you practice to develop those habits and behaviors so that you transition being prepared and having the tools into the actual ability to take action.
So, thinking this in sports terms, or, and I'm a competitive weightlifter, it's almost like you're going to play as how you practice. So you have to practice the movement, the process over and over again in order to execute the play correctly. They also would say that, there's no really such thing as muscle memory. You have to keep these skills fresh in your mind. Which leads me to this question. A lot of people are like, well, I don't want to have that head of my swivel mindset all the time. It's a lot of weight to carry. And how do you address that? Because now I disagree with that. I'm like, I'm perfectly willing to take up that extra space and be self-aware. It doesn't really bother me at all. But for some people, that's a huge hurdle.
Yeah. So, and there are degrees that people have of levels of preparation. So I am one of those people that truly has my head on a swivel all the time. But I've taken it to the next level. Most of the time when I'm in a gas station or a grocery store or a department store, if I'm out with my wife and daughters and we're shopping, I've actually, just a quick aside here, I've had people come up to me because I'd be standing in the front of the last time it happened. I was standing in front of a makeup store by the door, and I was watching the door, and I was watching people come in and head on a swivel. And my wife and my daughters were shopping, and I had somebody come up and say, "Are you their bodyguard?" So I was actually kind of flattered about that. But so there are degrees, but what we introduce with the Paratus process that we've developed, when you spend about 30 or 40 seconds when you first enter a location and you go through this process, you set that standard of recognizing what normal is, getting into Colonel Cooper's yellow level of preparation. Then you can go about what you're doing. You still have to pay a little bit of attention, but what happens is that God-given gift of the hair on the back of the neck, or that gut feeling, when something enters your environment that wasn't there, your senses will pick up on that. Then you now have the ability to go back to your process and analyze, what is causing me to feel that way. So people today, unfortunately, are about 47% of the people that are in the work environment today are afraid of what's going on in their work environment. And we can dramatically improve that by them just being prepared. Preparation is what overcomes fear. And I had a friend of mine tell me that, and then that ties into being able to then rise to an occasion because you are prepared, you have thought about what you're going to do. And then another unique part of our program that I'll just introduce here is that we don't tell people what to do, Travis. We know that everybody's an individual. Everybody has different skills, capabilities, moral agendas, things that they're willing to do. And one of the reasons I bring that part up is we went and trained a bunch of teachers to carry weapons in a school district. And one of the key questions I asked at the very beginning was, are you really willing and prepared to take the life of a young man who happens to be the son of one of your friends? And there were a lot of teachers that were not able to make that decision. So it's an individual piece that's part of our program where everybody figures out what they're capable of doing, what actions they would take. And then if they want to be able to do other things, we steer them to go get that training.
So let's talk about the program at the macro level first, and then dig down. You're head of the Paratus Group, and you have a program of preparation. At the macro level, what's that entail, please?
Yeah, so our program is not traditional training. And as a matter of fact, if you look at all of the threats that we've been experiencing for the last 20 years, every single one of them is getting worse. Human trafficking is growing at a 1,400% rate year after year. Suicide is on the rise. Bullying is on the rise. Carjacking is on the rise. It's because we have this traditional training that is a 1 or 2 hour training that as you and I have already talked about, people then forget. So our program is actually a year long, and it starts out with a 90-day micro e-learning platform on a learning management system. It takes 21 days to establish new habits and 90 days to establish new behaviors. So that's what we are empowering in that first 90 days. And what you get in the first week, we have a week's worth of videos. Those videos are about 12 to 15 minutes long. And we're introducing what is situational awareness, what are all of the threats we face today, what are the 10 critical personal skills that you need to be able to practice situational awareness. And then we introduce our process, our 5-step process. That's what happens in the first week. From week 2 through week 12, then they get a video that's about 3 or 4 minutes long. We just want to reinforce their development of their own habits, behaviors, and a mindset. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's a 3 to 4 minute video. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they get an email from Paratus that is talking about real world events and how that you can prevent that real world event from happening by practicing your Paratus process, by developing your habits, behaviors, and your mindset. So from week 2 to week 12, it's never more than 3 to 5 minutes a day. But again, we're reinforcing that. So at the end of the 90 days, you are established the habits and the behaviors of practicing your process. And those habits and behaviors now are not something that you have forgotten. It's something that you practice all the time.
So this isn't like a weekend boot camp or, a Zoom call. This is spaced out and timed out to where it becomes just an automatic part of your day.
Absolutely. And then the second phase of our program is a workshop that's about 5 hours long. Because one of the things that we found in our program is I've been doing this for so long, I have thought of so many different ways to respond in different areas that, somebody that has only taken the program for the first time hasn't thought of. So in the workshops, we role play, we talk about different things that can happen, and everybody in the group will then put out how they would react. And it's not to tell somebody else what they should do, but it's to offer new ideas. And one of the powerful parts of the workshop is not me speaking. I try to follow the 1/3, 2/3 rule, where I speak about 1/3 of the time and they speak 2/3 of the time. They learn more from each other because they're much more like each other than they are somebody that does this on a regular basis and actually goes out and talks about it on a regular basis. So they actually learn more from each other. So we do have a second phase. And then another thing that we do in our program for people that want to use weapons to defend their home, we will have a workshop with them to help them figure out how to do that. There's so many people that have bought guns over the last 2 or 3 years that really don't know how to use those weapons. They might put it on their nightstand, but they never practice it. They never think about what they would do in their home. They never think about who else is in their home. They never think about the type of ammo they have in their weapon. So there's a whole host of things that people need to think about as far as the preparation. But then again, I talk about how in this house, and most people that have gone through our program, every night before I go to bed, I do my process. Doors are locked, lights are on, alarm system's on, who's in the house, who's not in the house, where's my weapon, how am I going to use that weapon? If my daughter's not home, I'm just going to barricade in the bedroom and I'm going to defend my wife and I. But if there's other people in the house, then I have to do different things to defend the home. But I have to think about that every single night because every single night is different. And that's why it's so important to have a process that you practice, because every day is different. Every hour is different. Every time, I talk about every time I go to the same coffee shop, which I've been to 500 times, people will ask me, well, you've been there 500 times. Why do you, practice your process? Well, every time I go into that coffee shop, it's different. There's different people. There's different things that are going on. I'm going to have some different experiences. One of the things that I do in my process is I look to see if there's anybody that's out there that's like you that I could count on in case something happens. And there are times I'll walk into that coffee shop and there's nobody there that I can count on. There's other times that there are 10 people that I can count on. And but I'm also potentially going to be having a meeting, or I could be bringing my family. So every single time is different. So that's why, as part of our information that we provide and part of our program, it's all about people being empowered to understand that this is not traditional training. You do have to put an investment in, but when you put that investment in, you learn what normal is, you become prepared, and that's actually makes it a much fuller life because now you're not living in fear.
Okay, sir. So let me use an example from my life about what I do in a situation, and let's for right now grade it against the Paratus process, and you tell me if it's adequate, lacking, or on par. So I fly. And when I fly, I like to be the last one on the plane at the rear of the plane because I want to walk in the plane and kind of get an idea of who's in the rows in front of me. Does that person look like a threat? Are they, calm? Or if they're already tipping back the drinks, that's somebody I kind of want to have in the back of my mind. And then the rear of the plane means I can be defensively offensive from one direction. I don't have to worry about a threat behind me necessarily. If someone's in front of me, there they are. And then I watch the stewardesses doing their job, the flight attendants, and if they're worried, it's kind of funny. I know they're trained to do this. They're trained to see who is kind of doing the same thing. And I'm not saying I'm looking for a problem, but if there's a problem, then I've kind of got in my mind where that problem is, and I know what I can do and where I am to react to it. So that's kind of how I treat planes. And people say I'm crazy, but I'm like, you know what? If somebody's going to get wild at 3,000 feet, I want to know that I can take care of the problem or help someone take care of the problem. How does that play against what you teach in the Paratus process?
Yeah, so that is awesome. I do it a little bit opposite, but a lot of the same things.
Okay.
I normally sit in the front of the airplane and I'm watching everybody as they get on the airplane. So I'm looking to see what baggage they have. If they have a backpack, are they paying attention? Are they looking at different things? Are they averting their eyes? And then I'm looking at every single person that goes by to determine if that is somebody I'd be able to count on. It's interesting. Unfortunately, today, most of the time when I going through this process, there are very few people that get on that airplane that I believe I could count on. And then I took a flight about 2 weeks ago, and it must have been a bunch of military guys that were going somewhere because there were 15 people that got on the airplane. I go, well, I'm not going to count on them. I'm going to help them if something happens. I'm paying attention to the flight attendants, just like you said. I'm also watching who is getting on the airplane to see if there's an air marshal on board, and I'm also looking even before the boarding process because they're usually going to board first. So I'm looking to see who is queuing to potentially get on the airplane to see if there's an air marshal on the airplane. Because for me, that's important. There's a number of things that I would do, downstream if something were to happen, if there's an air marshal on board. But I go through that process as well. And then the other thing that I do that drives me crazy is I pay attention to the demonstration that the flight attendants give. Because I've flown airplanes forever, if I'm paying attention to what they're saying, I have now reinforced in my mind, in my lizard brain, if something happens, this is what I'm going to do. I've got a very good friend of mine, another retired colonel who's also a navigator, and he works for Northrop Grumman, so he travels a lot. And he was taking off out of Melbourne one day, and they got fumes in the airplane, and the flight attendants actually didn't know what to do. The fumes were not in the cockpit; it was just in the back of the airplane. So he started yelling to the flight attendant, "Tell the pilot to abort! Tell the pilot to abort!" Because usually that's an indicator that something's wrong with one of the engines. So you want to abort if you can. They stopped on the runway, got everybody to start getting off of the airplane. But because people don't listen to what the flight attendants say, now in that stressful situation, they don't know what to do. They're not prepared. They are operating under fear and panic. And that's exactly what was going on. Is he said most of the passengers had absolutely no idea what to do. They were rushing things. Many of them were trying to get their bags out of the overhead, so they were keeping other people from getting off of the airplane. So that's why I pay attention every single time. And I also want to be in a position to help the flight attendants if I need to. Obviously, I have a background of flying airplanes, so but mine is
So,
very, very similar to yours. So I applaud you for that. You're the exception to the rule, unfortunately.
But still, the process is still crafted, at least as I hear it, around the fact that you had a plan to assess the situation before you got in the situation. So whether it's at a coffee shop, a mall, movie theater, aircraft, bank, you have an idea of how you're going to assess the general location, who to look for. So this location and the people, and then, the different vectors or exits. I call them threat vectors in my line of work that you can respond to. And then it doesn't take you a long time to do that because you've done it over and over and over again. And then
Yep.
you have certain tools with you, whether you may not be carrying a firearm, you may have something else, but you can use that if you need to, and you know who to go to and where to go. So that strikes me as the core of what you're trying to teach people who may not have ever done that before in their lives, right?
Absolutely, and that's where the Paratus process comes in.
Okay.
I mentioned the OODA loop at the beginning of,
Oh,
of
yes.
of our conversation. So observe, orient, decide, and act, and that is something that was drilled into me as I prepared when I was learning how to command my squadron, the 608th Combat Operations Squadron, when we were getting ready to go over and run the ops floor at the KAOC. And then I made sure it was drilled into my people because an air operations center is one of the focal points of where you actually practice the OODA loop, where you're constantly observing, orienting, deciding, and acting because the enemy's getting a vote. You have airplanes that are breaking. You've got weather. You've got all these things. So you have to consistently be doing this OODA loop. It's a constant thing that you practice. So I took that and turned that into the Paratus process, which is a circular process as well. It's identify, assess, predict, decide, and act. And then as part of the development of your situational awareness, you really just practice the first 3 steps every time you go somewhere. So when I walk into that coffee shop, the first thing I do is I stop, look, and listen. And then I identify, is there anybody in here that I'm concerned about that sets off that hair on the back of the neck or gives me that gut feeling? And I'll be fair and honest. There have been times I've taken my family to locations and I've gotten that hair on the back of the neck of that gut feeling and I couldn't identify it. And I told them, I'm sorry, we're not staying, we're leaving. I removed my family from potentially being, in a bad situation. Now, most of the time, nothing bad ever happened. But who's to say it didn't happen because we left? So that is probably, again, to the extreme, but that is what I've chosen to do as part of my piece. The next step then is you assess. So can I sit so my back's not to the door? Where are the exits? Do the bathroom doors lock? Is there security here? Are there other people that I could potentially, count on if something bad happens? Is there an AED? Do I see a tactical medical kit somewhere? Are there fire extinguishers? So many things to think about. And then, so it's identify, assess, and then predict. Now I think about if I see something happening, if I see somebody that I think is being human trafficked, what would I do? If I see people getting into a fight, what would I potentially do? If I see somebody walk in that is wearing a trench coat in the middle of summer, what would I potentially do? And then how would I protect my family if I'm with my family, or if there's others that I might want to protect? And so now I've done those first 3 phases. It takes about 25 to 35 seconds. And like you said, you do it so many times, it's just ingrained. It's a true behavior. Now don't have to be in fear. I am prepared if anything happens. Every now and then I'll look around. If somebody walks in, I'll take a look at them and I'm looking at their hands and their eyes and just a few key things. If it doesn't set off the hair on the back of my neck or give me a gut feeling, I just continue, with what we're doing with conversations or eating or drinking coffee. But there have been times where I sense and I get that hair on the back of the neck that somebody's, preparing to get into an argument with somebody, or I've had situations where fire alarms have gone off and people start to panic, but because I've thought about what to do in that situation, I then go to the 4th step. So identify, assess, predict, decide. Now I'm analyzing the situation. Okay, so the fire alarm's going off, but I don't smell smoke. I don't see fire. The work staff isn't upset. So I take a beat. Potentially I do tactical breathing. I practice that all the time. We teach that in our program as well. And there are times where it's no kidding a fire. Now we've got to take some action. The other reason it's important to not just immediately, jump into action and to take a few seconds in that decide part of our process is because you don't want to run directly into where the fire is. So you've got to do a little bit of prep, a little bit of analysis, figure out what's going on, potentially listen to somebody else that knows what's going on, and then be able to take directions or give directions yourself. And then the fifth step then is if you actually do have to leave because there's a fire in this example, then you act. So it's identify, assess, predict, decide, and act. Very infrequently do you get to the decide and act, but when you have to, you have now prepared yourself by practicing those first three steps. You know what you're capable of doing, and then you're now empowered to actually act and do something.
So as you're sitting here talking to me, one of the things that came to mind is this is all good if it's just me. And a lot of times, just me going to my places, I'm on the train going to work, so on and so forth. But, sir, in my experience, when I have my children, and yeah, they're kind of, they're not babies anymore, right? But they're still my children. When they're with me, I put their safety ahead of mine. So in my OODA loop, it's like, okay, if there's perceived threat or real threat, I want them as far away from the threat as possible before I even, decide to do the decide or act. Is that appropriate, or how do you? Because I'm sure a mother or even a father out with kids alone or with a family is thinking the same thing.
Yeah, so then that's a big part of what we talk about in our program as well. Our program, we go to businesses and churches and schools, but our main focus is families. It's
Okay.
parents. Um, what we have seen over the last 20 or 30 years, in my opinion, and you can share your opinion on this, but parents have abdicated a lot of responsibility to schools and to others, and they're not teaching their kids the necessary skills that they need to be successful in life. And it's not because they don't want to or can't, it's because they were never taught the skills. These skills have atrophied over the last 20 or 30 years. So with our program, when we empower parents to practice their 10 critical skills, which, by the way, only 7% of kids that graduate from college today actually know what these skills are and are able to practice them on a regular basis. So that's a whole nother scary story. But when we empower parents with this process, with the 10 critical skills, and to know the indicators that they're looking for in their kids, that's how they can help protect their kids. But what they're also doing through contagious behavior, through learning opportunities, they're making sure their kids learn and develop this skill. And this whole process, I've been doing this for a long time. Just, over the last 5 years, I've turned it into my mission. But when I was, had younger kids, I used those learning opportunities when we would go to a restaurant and I'd ask them a question about where are the exits, or did you see where the fire extinguisher is, or, or they would sit in the seat that I needed to sit in so that my back wasn't to the door. Well, my oldest daughter, who's now 33 years old, when she was a young teenager, we went to a restaurant with family friends, and her friend went to sit in the seat that my daughter knew that I needed to sit in. And my daughter told her friend, "I'm sorry, you can't sit there. My dad has to sit there." And her friend said, "Well, why does your dad have to sit there?" And my daughter rattled off, "My dad has to sit so his back's not to the door. He needs to see the exits. He'll have a plan of action if anything happens, and he's going to tell us what to do." So she learned through the contagious behavior how to practice this process at an early age, and now she practices it all the time. And it's at a point now in our family where, and I'm like you, if my family is with me, my number one goal is to protect my family and make sure they're safe. Once I know that that's the case, then I will decide if I'm going to do something else to potentially protect others, or go take out whoever the perpetrator is. There are times I won't do it, but there are times I will. And I have thought through from a mental, decision-making standpoint, those things that I am prepared to do. But number one is to take care of my family, but they have also learned and developed this skill, so they know exactly what to do in these situations. So I don't have to tell them a lot. I just am looking at, and they're already doing the actions that they need to do to take cover or prepare to leave or whatever the case is. So it's when the entire family is prepared, that's how it happens smoothly. And then we all figure out what we're capable of doing. And the other big part of what we talk about at Paratus and why we think parents and families learning this skill is so important is we all need to come together in our communities and take on this responsibility for the safety of our families, but also for the safety of our communities. We need to help all of our emergency responders because of things that are going on. It's like we see with all the divisiveness in our country today. I actually believe 75 to 80% of the people in our country are in the middle. They have common sense and they want all the crap that's going on to be fixed. It's the same way when we take care of our communities. When people are prepared, when they're not going to allow a bully or a group to, to do certain things. The bad people that are out there, the perpetrators are looking for the easy victims. When we have very, very few easy victims, and then we have a lot of sheepdogs that are around, that's how we are going to be able to truly make sure that our communities stay safe, especially with a lot of stuff that is going on today. That's why it's so critical for people to become prepared and not just to be able to do the things that they need to do, but like you talked about at the very beginning, also have the tools. I talk many, many times about, if there's power outages or there's some type of an attack on our infrastructure, most people today are not prepared and won't make it past 2 or 3 days. And there's a great book by Vince Flynn called Total Power, where a foreign actor takes down the grid in the United States, and within 5 days, there's anarchy. And that's all it took.
We saw this during COVID, sir. We saw this during COVID where people were getting in fights at Walmart over toilet paper. And then I'm like, this is just toilet paper. We're not even talking about fresh water, which most people don't understand. They've only got maybe a day or two in their house before they're completely out. I mean, it's going to be anarchy.
Well, it's sanitation as well. That's what another thing that people
Yeah.
don't think about.
So to answer your earlier question, I believe that parents have let the schools, for lack of a better term, take over. I think, having these tools and this robust program that you have will give parents the means to protect their families. I think that's also something that I want to ask you about is, as things have gone on, I think people are waking up, sir, to the fact that you can't really trust the government or your local fire and police to protect you. It's becoming very clear. I mean, it used to be, well, I mean, I live in the city, the police are 2 minutes away, I'll be fine. And people are finding out that 2 minutes is a long time at best, right? So I think there is shifts in thinking. I just don't think it's hit flashpoint yet. But for those people who've gone through your program, whether they're a single mom or a mom and dad family or a retired person, what's it like watching them go through their program and start adapting the mindset that you're trying to instill in them with the Paratus method?
Travis, that's actually the biggest reward that I've been getting, and those that are associated with our program is when we get the feedback from those people that have gone through our program. They recognize what normal is, and then they actually get their eyes opened and see that there's a lot of crap going on in our neighborhoods and in our communities that people, when they have the blinders on, they aren't aware. They hear about a number of the threats that we face and our kids face out there, but because they have those blinders on, because they think it's not going to happen to them, or they think their community is safe, they don't take it seriously until something bad happens. In our program, in the first week, we have a survey. In question number 5, we ask, how many of you that are going through the program have, experienced in your immediate family or close friends one of these 8 threats, like rape, sexual assault, human trafficking, suicide? 92% of the people that have gone through our program have had something like that happen in their life. And a lot of times what we see out there is stovepipe talk about how do you stop human trafficking? Well, the traditional training doesn't work. So you need to be empowered with a program like ours to help prevent human trafficking. How do you stop suicide? Traditional training doesn't work. You have to empower people to take action when they see the indicators. One of the best stories was from a retired couple who really want to try and do something about human trafficking. And they had gone to a lot of events where they were introduced to all of the indicators, and they were really good on knowing what those indicators were. And they actually shared that they had, on a number of times, thought they had seen young boys or girls that might be, somebody that's being human trafficked. But because they didn't know what to do about it, just calling an 811 number isn't going to do anything. People aren't even empowered to do that, even though that's part of, what they tell you to do if you see somebody being human trafficked. So they took our program, they learned what normal was, but more importantly, they practiced the process, and in the predict phase, they figured out, okay, if we think we see a young boy or girl being human trafficked, this is what we're now going to do. This is the action they're going to take. So not long after that, they see a young girl that they believe is being controlled by the man that is with her and is being human trafficked. So they waited until the man took the girl out and walked outside and went to a car. They followed the man and the girl out to the parking lot. They took a picture of the license plate and a picture of the car. And as that car was driving off, they dialed 911 and told the dispatcher they thought that a young girl was being human trafficked, gave the description of the car and the license plate. And, while the dispatcher was typing in, it came up as a stolen car, and she actually said that over the phone. So this couple knew that at least it was a stolen vehicle, and they also then empowered law enforcement to be on the lookout for that car. Now, it was a stolen vehicle, so something nefarious was going on. Whether that young girl was truly being human trafficked or not, we never found out the results of anything, but they actually felt so empowered because they were able to take an action, and that action turned into something. And then that is also something when I talk about our program, because people say, well, yeah, but people don't want you to get involved. Well, the more people that are prepared, the more people that understand that we all should be taking care of what's going on in our communities. That's how we would become empowered to then actually do something and not being afraid to doing something. It's when we all work together. That's how we put ourselves in a position to prevent these bad things from happening. So it all ties together. I'm a big proponent of the holistic approach. You've got to be prepared at the front end. You have to have the tools to be able to do what you need to do. You have to have the training, but then you have to be able to, consistently think about those things. And the other big thing that our program really works on is de-escalation. The ability to not escalate a situation because you practice your 10 critical skills, and then how to keep a situation from escalating. The divisiveness in our country, you mentioned, the arguments over masks. It takes two people in those situations to have that argument. If just one of those individuals has empathy, has humility, can practice their 10 critical skills, knows how to de-escalate a situation, is able to walk away, that's how we solve in my opinion, so many of the problems that are going on today.
De-escalation is huge, and you shouldn't do that when two sides are pointing guns at each other. I'm a big proponent of carrying. I carry myself, but if you don't have to draw it, that's a good day. That's a really good day. It almost seems like going back to this idea of preparation and being aware and then empowerment. Evil will only flourish if good people do nothing. So that is to say, without people being prepared, without people being ready to act and observing, evil can exist in this vacuum, no problem. But what the Paratus Group is trying to do, what you're trying to do is, if someone is acting in a bad manner toward a child or to somebody else, and 20 people see that, it's not going to get very far, it seems like.
That's the nail on the head. So what I talk about, one of the simplest places to really learn and practice this skill is at a gas station. The assaults and robberies in gas stations are on the rise because people don't pay attention. They have no situation at a gas station. They sit in their vehicle. And when I pull into the gas station, I practice my process. I identify. So, where can I pump gas for my vehicle and still have the ability to see everything that's going on around me. Then I assess is there anybody there that I'm concerned about? Who else is there? Because what really happens for me now is I'm less concerned about my own safety, and I'm more concerned to be watching out what is going on to all of the other people in the gas station that aren't paying attention. Um, and by default, if I'm looking out to make sure that they're safe, well, then I'm going to be safe. So it's that is, to your point, when more people do that, and when less people sit in their vehicle on their phone while gas is going into their car and they're paying attention to what's going on, they look like a difficult, target. They're not the easy prey. That's how we make a difference. If people just become prepared and they pay attention to what's going on when they're out and about, and they're not that easy target, the predators are going to find it harder and harder and harder to find those easy targets. And then we are all going to be able to work together. We're going to be able to support our emergency responders, our law enforcement, fire, EMTs, because we are helping them prevent bad things from happening. They can then get back into more prevention, which they really don't have time to do now. And if you've heard me say, I call them the emergency responders. They today hopefully will come when you dial 911. You said 2 minutes. My experience with law enforcement many times, because they are so overtasked, it can be 3 to 5 minutes. And if you're out in a rural part of Texas here, it can be 10 or 15 minutes. So you have to be the first responder. You need to be prepared to be able to deal with whatever it is, have the tools, have the training, but have the habits, the behaviors, and that mindset to be able to actually act and take action.
Sir, I mean, 5 to 10 minutes is a lifetime in certain situations. As you know, a lot can go right or very, very wrong, very, very fast. How can people connect with you, the Paratus Group, and can they do it individually? Do you prefer to do it in groups? So like if there's a community group, a school, or women's auxiliary wanted to take training, do you do it at the group level, or is it all just person by person? I'm just curious here because people are going to want to know how to connect with you.
Yeah, so we do all of the above. So we
Okay,
do
great.
what I prefer to stand in front of, 100, sets of parents, or 200 sets of parents, or a large church group, and introduce this program to them, and then offer them the opportunity to enroll in our program so they can actually establish the habits and the behaviors. People can just go directly and enroll in our LMS, and it's everything that they need is right there. So it doesn't have to be a live event. But I really enjoy, setting that foundation, getting them to really understand how important it is. Now, people that are potentially listening to your great show here, this may be enough of an introduction for them, and they're just ready to enroll. The website is www.paratus, that's Paratus.group, and there's no .com on the end. It's just Paratus.group. They can go to the contact page to get in touch with me. They can go to the training tab, and they can directly enroll in the program right there. And like I said, it's in the learning management system. It's all self-contained. Everything that they need is there. We have just created a 3P coalition. I should say our program is the Be Aware, Stay Safe 3P program. And the 3 Ps are prepare, prevent, protect. And we've established a coalition where everybody that then enrolls in our program has the opportunity to, like I said, do those workshops. We're going to be having live Zoom events so they can learn from each other, share experiences that are going on in their communities. And they are feeding information back to Paratus as to what's going on in their communities. And then we're funneling that back into our program, because our Tuesday, Thursday content, there's 104 emails that go out over the course of a year when you enroll in our program, and we use real world events. The content's never more than 2 or 3 days old, because we want to use what's going on out there so that we make sure that people don't have those blinders on. They know how things are being affected with the new threats that are going on. And sometimes they're at the federal level because decisions are made there. Sometimes it's in local communities that happen all around. And when we develop a program for a school district, or we develop one for a business, we then also tailor that program to what that business or that school district has as their threats and their things that are going on. So it becomes personal. So everybody takes it, so it's something that they can actually use as they learn and develop their own habits and behaviors and practice their own process.
That's outstanding, sir. I mean, there's so many things that veterans do after the military service. It's all good, but this is a real world, something that's needed now, information, techniques, policies, procedures. I say policies because to me, a set of procedures is a policy about how to, really keep that aspect of service going. A lot of us military people, want to be in a protective, a role. We want to take care of those around us still, and this just reinforces that. As we close this down, what's next for the Paratus Group and you during this time, looking at 2025, because this year is flying by so fast.
It is flying by. And one of the things that's become evident to me in our society, in our communities, and the divisiveness that we have today, and what's going on with our governments and our elections, a big part of gullibility, if you will, is because people don't have the skills that are in our program. The 10 critical personal skills: being perceptive, thinking critically, being able to communicate, constantly learning, having humility and empathy. All of these skills are absolutely required for us to be able to take all the volumes of information that are out there today, and be able to discern what the truth is and what isn't the truth. And then that also ties into our overall safety. So I mentioned earlier that it's all a holistic approach. There's some great nonprofits out there that are dealing with a lot of the threats that we face, and they need to be there. But then we also need to empower people with the left of bang, with the ability to practice a process, to be prepared, and take that information and use it. And then also have the training and the tools that are out there. Have extra food, have an extra cooking source, know how to, have purified water, have a safe place for your documents, not be in a position where you have to rely on a phone and those types of things. There were people here not too long ago in North Texas where AT&T had a problem, and people couldn't get to their locations because they couldn't use the maps on their phones because they didn't know how to use a paper map and follow directions just to get somewhere, because they're so reliant on that. So it takes all of that preparation. And again, it all ties together. We empower parents, and parents empower their kids. Hopefully, prayerfully, 20 years from now, this won't be a problem anymore, because we will go back to how it was when I was growing up, when you were growing up, where we were outside all the time. We weren't on our phones. We learned and developed these 10 critical skills. We learned through the things that we did, how to make mistakes and how to learn from those mistakes. But you have to have this skill to be able to do it.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, you see the value of the veteran. You see the value that service can bring to the community after retirement or leaving the service, and this aspect of preparation. If you've been around any kind of person in the military, we prepare. We play like we practice. And so this aspect of the Paratus Group, I think, is needed now more than ever. Colonel Searcy, I just want to thank you for coming on and talking with me. I have learned a whole lot. I'm just like totally locked in to what you're doing, and wish you all success. And thank you again for coming on Oscar Mike Radio.
No, thanks for having me on, and thanks to Danielle for putting us together. She and Scott are awesome, and she's doing some great
lightning.
things. Yep.
You can say it, sir. She's cage lightning.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on, Travis.
As we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are Mission in Flight. I want to thank you all again for watching. I'll have the links to the Paratus Group in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. And I'll close with this. We're Mission in Flight. Thank you.
Remember, OODA teaches our mission. We care about it, we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 for Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REAP, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, Live with Purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinista One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.